Hello, guys. I am fired up. This is Brian Hilliard, author of the best-selling book, Networking Like a Pro, and creator of the popular program, How to Find and Win More Conference Speaking Engagements. I am here with Su Sarvis, and I'm fired up because we're going to talk a little networking here today, Sue.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Brian. I really appreciate it. We definitely gelled talking earlier about networking and our love of networking. So I'm very thankful that you are having me on. Thank you.
Oh, it's my pleasure. It's my pleasure. You're coming to us from H-Town,
I am.
which is one of my favorites. I get down to Houston. I haven't gotten down there. By the way, and I am not trying to pop this on you on air, but I'm actually going down to Houston. Um, I'm doing a conference down there. I
Oh,
was like,
okay.
I haven't been there. I'm just getting, that's what reminded me of it. I haven't been
Yeah,
there in like 10 years, but I am going to be going down there later on this year. All right.
good.
So, with that said, we are going to talk about networking. We're going to talk about networking to build your business. And just so everybody is clear, sometimes we have coaches who are on the show and they're talking about what they're doing. Other times we have people in other industries. Okay. This is door number two. We have somebody in a different industry who's going to talk to us a little bit about what she's done to be successful as a networker. We've got three or four maybe points that we want to be able to cover. And as a coach, I think we can definitely take some good stuff from this conversation because I think sometimes we can get a little bit insulated. If we don't watch out, we're just watching the same people lose. I'm not putting anybody down. I'm just saying if we don't watch out, we can get very insulated. We're watching the same people, doing the same stuff, saying the same things. That's not going to be the case today. All right. So, with all of that said, Sue, why don't you tell us a little bit? You talked about one of the points we wrote down here was how everything you got has come through networking. So, talk to us a little bit about that conceptually. Everything you got came through networking. Maybe walk us through a story if you have one. What are we looking at when you say that?
Sure. So for myself and my journey, the emphasis when I look back on my career and the positions that I've had, really, I've gotten majority of them, I think all but one, all through networking
Right,
and keeping my network one fresh and vibrant, cultivating it purposefully
right,
and keeping up with people. I mean, first of all,
mhm,
everyone knows never burn a bridge, but really keeping up with people. I recently actually had a conversation with someone at a competing brand, and we had a great conversation. And then a news article came out, and I just texted it to her and I said, "Hey, have you seen this?"
right,
I mean, she's an industry professional manager, just like myself. It was something very small, but I just want to maintain that relationship. You never know what might happen in the future, et cetera,
right,
where she might be in the future, where I might be in the future. It's
right,
as simple as sharing a news article about the
right.
same industry that you're in or something that, you know, has to do with coaching, et cetera. But for me, I made a pivot from education and being a teacher to
Mhm.
really diving into real estate broker management, all because of a double date. I went on a double date with someone, and the young lady that was the person's date happened to work at this brokerage, and we hit it off. And I mentioned that I have my license. I've always had my real estate license, but I'm interested in making a change from education and being a teacher. And she said, I should put you in touch with my boss, my broker, and y'all should talk. And at the time, she was actually doing a role called ISA, inside sales agent.
Yeah,
She was answering the phone, nurturing a lead to become a
right,
customer. And
right.
she was like, "Oh, you should do what I do." And I wasn't quite sure what she did, but I just said, okay. And I went to go meet the broker because you just never know.
Right,
Um, and and after our conversation, he said, no, you should be training my agents. Like, you're coming from education.
right,
You obviously are good at speaking and, building rapport, et cetera, and real estate. So you should come be my agent trainer. I'm looking for someone. If I had said, oh, no, 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 I'm not an ISA, I don't
right,
want to do that, I
right,
never would have opened myself up for a different possibility.
right,
And so I think really keeping an open mind, keeping a yes in mind
right,
when you're networking, because the
right.
opportunity might not be the right opportunity, but you never know what it could turn into, is super important. So there's one example of an interview or opportunity from networking. Now, that was a random double date, but my next position, which actually was a step up as a sales manager at a brokerage, a luxury brokerage, which had been in business for 50 plus years, was the result of a vendor partnership relationship that I had with someone in title. And they heard about an opening, and I guess we had talked maybe a little bit about growth and personal growth and career growth, et cetera. And she really connected the dots for me and got me that interview. And so that's another example. And then I have a third, if you would like
Sure.
it. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
My third was I had interviewed for the #1 brand in the country, and it was right around the pandemic. And
Right.
I mean, I had gone on, I'm not joking, like 7 interviews
Yeah.
with this company of all
Yeah.
different kinds of leadership. And
Yeah. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
then I didn't hear. Next steps were supposed to be HR. I didn't hear. Turned out
Right.
my recruiter got let go during the pandemic, like a layoff. Like layoffs were happening, at the beginning of the pandemic, like March,
Right.
April, when people were starting to work from home or
Right.
companies were laying off. My
Right.
recruiter, who had been my point of contact the entire time, got laid off. And then I just never heard. Well, through the grapevine, I heard they hired someone that I know in the Woodlands, a suburb area, and they're great. So, okay. Well, months later, I would say 7 months later, I got really close to a real estate professional at that company. And I mentioned to them how I had interviewed. I'd really wanted it, did not get it. I know who got it. They're great. Good for him. And she said, I think they're looking for someone else too. Why don't
Right.
I make a phone call
Right.
to this person named Joe? And I said,
Right.
I know Joe. I interviewed with him. I
Right.
remember him. So
Right.
she picked up the phone when I was in the room and proceeded to call this person. And they
Right.
remembered me, and they said, tell her to send her resume, et cetera, directly to me. And I did that, and I got hired the second time. So
Right.
I didn't get down in the dumps
Right.
and think, oh, I didn't get hired. They didn't want me. First of all, it was a flurry with the pandemic and layoffs
Right.
and whatnot.
That's
But
exactly right.
being up for it, going for it again, being comfortable enough to talk with her in confidence that I had interviewed for that, did not get it. And that spurred her to say, oh, they're looking for one additional person now.
Right.
So, networking did all of that. My relationships did all of that. And
That's
so
exactly right.
super important to keep your circle large and keep it growing.
That's exactly right. I think as coaches, what happens is sometimes there's this race towards expertise. So people are like, oh, well, I'm an expert business coach. Oh, well, I'm an expert life coach. Oh, well, I'm an expert in this. I'm an expert in that. There's this, I'm watching For All Mankind on Apple TV, which if you haven't seen it is excellent. It's the space race. It's the space race.
Oh, I think I
Okay.
saw that. I didn't know it was called that, but I
Yeah.
saw a snippet of
Yeah.
it. Yeah,
Well,
looked
you
good.
know where they got that from? They didn't tell this. I thought it was Neil Armstrong, one giant step for man, another giant step for all mankind. I thought it was from that. And maybe it was, but actually it was on the plaque of Apollo 11. They apparently put plaques on these ships,
Oh.
and it was something else, like something we come in peace. We come in peace, actually, now that I'm remembering it, for all mankind. So they said it
Oh,
twice. They had
okay.
it different
Okay.
places. Okay. Anyway,
Interesting.
so yeah, it's really interesting. And the premise, just in case anybody's wondering, is instead of us, the US, getting on space first, the former Soviet Republic did. And that got everybody fired up. We're
Yeah,
on
I
Apollo.
bet.
Everybody got mad. We never stopped. Okay.
Yeah.
So,
Hey, being in Houston with NASA here, yeah.
right.
Yeah.
We never stopped. We didn't stop. So, you have that situation, and I was watching again Apple TV For All Mankind, and it was what they needed to do to get onto the crew, what they needed to do to get onto the actual, because you had astronauts, and then you had the mission, right? There was relationships, so there's networking that way. But then there's this other way, like I was saying, the opposite, which coaches, they kind of view this race towards expertise like the space race. And like, oh, well, I'm just going to get there first. And the Soviets did get there first, but we got there. We wound up putting a homestead, a space station on the moon. Okay. And so the idea is that I think as coaches, there's this, in my opinion, erroneous belief that if I could just show people how smart I am, if maybe I can just come up with the smartest sounding, best thing using expert 5 times, including Greek, Latin, and English, okay, and maybe Mandarin, so 4 languages, and I can put that on my LinkedIn profile, that more people will like me and work with me. And I try to tell them, listen, one of the ways to really grow your business if you're trying to build a word of mouth practice is through networking. Another way I think is through speaking too, separate discussion. But like the way we're talking about now is networking. You know what I mean? And you also made a really good point that I want to deep dive into here a little bit as well. You made 2 good points actually. One of them was that you keep up with, that you've been keeping up and refreshing. I'd like to touch on that point, just what you're doing exactly. And then the other point, and I'll ask him as 2 separate questions, but the other point will be this idea of keeping a yes in mind when networking. I love both of those. So let's tackle the first one first, which is the notion of keeping up with people. Talk to us about how you're staying. I guess you already mentioned one example with an article. Are there some other things that maybe you do? And if not, that's fine. But if there are, we'd love to hear.
Sure. So I actually learned this in business planning with my real estate agents. To have, if you have a CRM,
Right.
you can put a calendar reminder. I mean, everyone that matters to you and your network professionally should be in a CRM, not just
Okay.
clients, but industry heavy hitters that you're close to or trying to get to know, et cetera. They should
Right.
be in your CRM with like a due date. You talk to them, put a due date for next quarter, touch them, once a quarter is sufficient depending on, your relationship to them and with them, et cetera. But what I used to do too is, take it, and I would take a calendar event and in the description, write 5 people I wanted to connect with that week.
Oh,
Whether
okay.
it's just a phone call, a text, ask them to go to coffee, ask them to go to lunch, et cetera.
So let me
And
stop you just for 1 second there. So I'm so sorry. Let me stop you because I love this. So when you say a calendar event, am I hearing a time blocking conversation? Like you put it in there?
no,
Okay.
no, and if you're a time blocker, you're really not going to like it. So I used to
Okay.
have on Monday morning an all day event, that didn't make me busy. It just was up there.
Right.
All day event with like 10 people in the description that
No,
I
that's
wanted to
fine.
reach out and
Yeah.
touch
Yeah.
at some point during that week. It may
Yeah.
be all on Friday. It may be all on Tuesday. It may be
Right.
a couple during the week.
Okay.
Um, what I actually used it for was, here are the 10 people I'm going to email and see if they want to business plan with me this week or next, whenever, but at least I reached out to them
Yeah.
on this week, right?
Right. Right.
Because we had a
Right.
goal of business planning once a quarter with everyone.
Okay.
So it was a once a quarter hit, but using this for networking, like I want to reach out to these 2 people, these 5
Right.
people, 10,
Right.
whatever it is, at some point this week. And then it's a recurring event for
Right.
once a quarter.
Right.
Because not everybody's in their CRM every day or want to use it like that with industry networking. But it's definitely a viable option. And it can be as innocent as, hey, I hope holidays are coming up. Hope you and your family are good. Do y'all have any big plans? It can be as simple
Right.
as a text. Or
Right.
it can be a coffee date or virtual coffee. I have
Right.
a girlfriend that I met through Houston Association of Realtors.
Okay.
Um, and we are personal friends as well as industry friends now.
Right.
Now our
Right.
relationship has grown that much. And we will set up a coffee, we call it a coffee date, for Friday at 8 a.m. or 9 a.m. and just have coffee virtually over
Right.
Zoom and catch
Right.
up.
That's a
And
really good idea.
that's networking as well. It doesn't have to be in person if you don't live in the same area. If
Right.
you see an article, you see an ad for whatever conference that you both might be at or be
Right.
interested in, just taking
Right.
a screenshot and sending it to them.
Right. No, that's really good because I think a lot of times, one of the things that I like to do as well is making connections. And it's counterintuitive
Yeah.
because we think, thank God the world works like this. There's a lot of ways the world works that doesn't really work for me. But this one does, which is that relationships are almost always a determining factor to the growth of your business or whatever you're trying to do. The growth of yourself is almost always a determining factor to your capacity to create those relationships. And
Mm,
then from there, you have a system where if you're helping others, this is the connection point. If I make a connection between you and Sally Sue, and I haven't talked to Sally Sue in a while, in my mind, I get a 2 for 1. So like when
Mhm.
I do, right, like I've got, you talk about CRM, I keep up with the people. So here's a pro tip maybe for people as well, some of the coaches listening. I will tag all of the people who I've had good one-to-ones with. Like
Mhm.
I've liked them, and it's an orange tag. I'm pretty sure it's orange tag. Okay.
Okay.
And I've got, let's say 80. I just transferred to a new CRM. So let's call it 80 people who
Okay.
fall into that category. Okay. And then you have your clients, and then you have your referral partners, and then you have maybe some other people, maybe people I did podcasts with. That's probably a good idea. So let's say the number goes up twice that amount, 150. Okay. But now I have this universe, this discrete universe. So when I'm sitting down with Sally Sue talking about whatever, oh, hey, I understand your business. Hey, have you thought about meeting this person, this person? I don't have to come up with this off the top of my head. I can just look, right? Like I'll do that. It's like, all right, I understand your business. Let me see who I know who maybe can assist or move you forward. Everyone's okay
Mhm.
with that,
Yeah,
right? And,
sure.
and then from there, you're connecting with people that you haven't really maybe talked to in a while. And I've used that as a double play
Yeah.
where I'll say, hey, Sue, this is Sally. She should, you guys should meet or whatever. And then I'll send another text right afterwards. Hey, Sally, I know it's been a long time since we talked. What do you say we do a one-to-one to catch up? So you can do this. My point is, I think sometimes when people think about, and that's why I want to hear your points about keeping up, they think of this as some type of like, like the old the galley scenes like on A&E with
Yeah.
those just
Yeah.
throw,
Yes.
whoosh, throw, like it's this huge lift every time. And I don't think that's the case. I like your
Right.
approach. I like mine too, obviously. People can choose to do both, or maybe they have some
Sure.
other ones, but those are some good ones. And then let's get to the second point, keeping yes in mind when networking. Talk
Yeah.
to me about that a little bit. I like that.
I think that the more open you are, I think that that will serve you well in anything that you do. And so I think keeping a yes in mind, even if, the opportunity may present itself in one way, you just never know where that opportunity may take you. Or like I mentioned, being saying yes and then being interviewed by someone that had the capacity and authority to look at something differently.
Right.
And so I think you just never know where things might take you. I recently interviewed someone for my podcast. She leads real estate,
Okay.
and we've become really close because I thought, you know what, this person, they own a bodyguard business, like for
Interesting.
executives and celebrities.
Interesting.
And we really had a great time. We really hit it off. And I thought, how could I make this fit? And it just so happens that September is Realtor Safety Month.
Oh, look at you.
I had her come on the podcast. I asked her to type up, could you type me up like a few tips, a checklist, something that I can share with those that listen, et cetera. And she came on and we talked all about personal safety,
That's
like close
interesting.
proximity. And she shared a couple of tips about what her bodyguards do and think when they're protecting someone. It was
That's
really
interesting.
interesting. And at first I was like, how can I make this fit? I feel like I can. And it took some thinking,
Right.
but when it's the right opportunity, you can make things fit for you and maybe your industry,
Right.
et cetera. Dealing, in business with coaches, I'm sure there are several that you could put together to have some kind of seminar or something, and they speak off of each other, right?
Right.
So
Right.
I think that exists everywhere. I love the law of attraction, thinking positively
Yeah.
and being
Yeah.
open, keeping yourself open. You just never know. Don't write off a
Yeah.
vendor partner because it's not your wheelhouse or whatever. You never know
Right.
where they might be in 5 to 10
Right.
years or where
Right.
you might be in 5 to 10 years. And
Right.
I think that if you, I want to say vibe, sounds super Gen Z, but like if you
No,
vibe with
it's true.
someone,
Yeah.
keep them in your networking circle for
You're
sure.
absolutely right about that. My girlfriend and I were taking a course on manifestation mastery. And
Yes.
it's through, I might have told you this before, I don't know, but it's through Vision Macchiani and Mind
Mm.
Valley. Highly recommend it. It's been great. And it takes that law of attraction and puts it on like turbocharge, because the idea we're doing like activations, we're like 3 or 4 weeks behind. They do twice a week. We're like 3 weeks. We're a good 4 weeks. I think we dropped it. We're 4 weeks behind, but we're looking at the listening to the recordings and
You
stuff
get
like
there.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
fine. It's fine.
Yeah.
And like, but OMG, it is just completely like, it just really helps out with what it is that you're trying to do. And this idea of keeping yes in mind, the idea of being open, the idea of, you know, one of the things, Regan is one of the teachers, and what she says is, and I think we can apply this to networking, don't get focused on the how. So let's say you want to
Mm.
make $1 million, or let's say $10,000. $10,000. I want to make $10,000 next month. Okay, so that's fine. She says, you go out and there's some certain things you need to do. It needs to be plausible. You need to agree to it. You need to understand it, stuff like that. She says, but once you got to that, don't get into the how. And that
Mm.
was a challenge for me, because you know what was happening? I was getting a little bit inadvertently, I was getting into the how. Okay.
Mm.
Inadvertently, I was getting into the how. I was getting into I threw out like it was interesting when I first did it. It's funny. I first was like, she's like, give me something. Let's go. Give a number. $2,000. And they want like, and it has to be like, it's not just make $2,000. That's one thing. It's like $2,000 is going to show up in my checking account on or before this date.
Mm.
And
Mhm.
it's like 3 weeks. It's not 10. It's not a business plan. It's not for me. I get installments from our mastermind. I get installments from my clients. It's not any of that. It's not any of that. It's new money that you don't have, that 3 weeks from now you do.
Mm.
$2,000. Okay, sure. Right? Like, that's too
Yeah.
quick to even start a deal for me. Like, something has to actually
Yeah.
happen.
Right.
and, and it was interesting because I was doing that. It went from, I swear to God, it went from 2,000 to 3,000. When I thought about it again, 3,000 came up. Then it went to 4,000. Wrote a number down, wrote that on my note card. After a few days, the 4,000 seemed small. I got 20. You know why? Because I had already at 2,800.
Oh, okay.
It's so I had some more time, so I went to 5,000. So my point is that when this law of attraction and this manifestation, I think as coaches, especially life coaches, we think to ourselves, oh, well, we don't want to be too woo-woo.
Mhm.
Maybe not. Like, I don't even agree with that, but that's not today's discussion. But in terms of our own lives, say yes, man. Keep yourself open. Meet some new people. Jump on a podcast. Start your own podcast. We're so busy on the Facebook groups, and that's fine. That's how we met. But like, jump on a podcast, do an interview, go speak, do a virtual. Um, Invite a guest to a networking event that you're going to. Like, there
Right.
are 20 ways, probably literally 20 ways to be able to do some risk-free, not heavy lift ways of meeting people that don't involve saying hello at Walmart. Okay.
Absolutely.
That can still move you forward. So I love that. Keep yes in mind. Tell us a little bit about because I want to finish up on this last point here. Tell
Sure.
us a little bit about the idea of how the role confidence has played into this, because I feel like that dovetails into maybe a sticking point for our listening audience, which is, well, that's great for you, Sue, and maybe that's great for you, Brian, but I'm kind of an introvert. You guys maybe aren't like that. Although I would tell you, you do not strike me as an extrovert, which would be an interesting discussion. You strike me as somebody who was a little bit more, and you just went out. So I'd love to hear the story. Tell me the story of
You
what
know
it is
what's
that.
funny? I think that I I really find myself, if I'm with someone or meet someone that is quiet,
Right,
is a true introvert, then I take on the more extroverted role. I will do
right.
that.
Right.
Okay. But if I'm with someone that is the life of the party, I let them do that, you know?
Right.
So I'm kind of in
So maybe
between.
you're doing that with me. Maybe that's what's happening.
I'm
But
kind of
that's
in
cool.
between. Yeah. Yeah, I'm kind of in between, but I will tell you this, if I have a long day of networking, or, a social interaction, et cetera, I am privy to say that I had a great day and that was so fun, but I'm tired.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. I'm
it
going to go
just,
watch Apple TV or whatever.
yes, yes. I think that there are, energy takers and energy givers.
That's a great start.
And I feed off of, obviously, energy givers. When
Right.
you have an energy taker call you, you look at your phone and you're like, oh man, I got to answer this,
Yeah.
right? Like
Right. Right.
that is exactly what happens. And so I feel like I'm going to tie this into being confident, I swear,
That's no problem.
somehow,
Take your time.
some way. But I think that you have to be confident. And for me, it goes back to kind of being open to yeses.
Yeah.
I much prefer to be optimistic with a dash of realism.
Right.
That's just me.
Right.
And so I don't think of it as confidence like, oh, I think I'm great. I don't think of it like that. I just
Right.
think, I'm just going to be me
Right.
and I don't get down easily.
Right.
So I just kind of go with that. I've got
Right.
this, in my arsenal. I've got this to offer. I've got this to talk about and be social, etc. And I'm just going to go for it. And I'm not going to think about what drawbacks maybe I don't have, which I feel
Right.
like a lot of people do, especially when they're
Good
looking
point.
for jobs,
Good point.
looking for career transitions, etc. A
Right.
lot of people, especially women, might not go for that position because they don't meet all of the criteria or qualifications needed.
Right.
Um,
Right.
and I feel like I never really thought that way. Like I'd see one that maybe I didn't quite meet,
Right.
and it didn't make me stop and not
Right.
apply. I still
Right.
applied, and then I went and looked up that thing that I didn't have, or,
Right.
looked it up on YouTube for a crash to learn about, or looked and saw if there's some kind of certificate or
Right.
accredited, a business organization about it, whatever it
Right.
was, what was I lacking? Was I close? Or was it something I need to go study up on before I get a call for an interview potentially, right?
Right.
And
Right.
I feel like you always have a few days in between, being scheduled for an interview and the actual interview.
You do.
So learning as much as you can
Right.
before the interview about that one, two, three things that you're lacking.
Right.
Um, and if they ask about one of those missing items, tie it in, learn about it and tie it in somehow to things that you already do,
Right.
right?
Right.
I'm not a XYZ certificate holder, but I employed that with this
Right.
project or
Right.
this function at work previously. I was doing it without even knowing I was doing it.
Right.
Um,
Right.
and being proactive. If it's a position that you really want, sign up for that certification, pay for it so that in the interview, you're like, I'm halfway done with my certificate or
Right.
whatever it is.
Right.
And I also think that there's power in substituting, education for experience or experience for education. So don't
Right.
be afraid to talk about that if asked. I don't think that there's harm in doing that.
Right.
And also my number one, for either you're missing a box or you're not missing a box, and this has worked for me previously, and it just came about naturally. I was in an interview and it was like the week before school started. This is when I was teaching. There was like
Okay.
a week before school started. And so it's go time. If you're going to get a position last minute, that's
Right.
it. And
Right.
then you got to wait
That's it
until there's
for the
just a
year.
random vacancy.
Right.
Um,
That's
and
right.
and the actual story is I'd gotten a position. She called and told me verbally, the principal, and then she called back and said that she had to rescind it and could I please not call HR? So I decided not to get her in trouble. I later found out she hired like her niece or something. So I was real desperate. Like it was the week before school started, so I was super desperate. And I remember having this great interview with this team, and at the end, they asked if I had any more questions or wanted to say anything, typical end of interview question. And I said, I would just be remiss if I didn't say I've really enjoyed this interview and I would love to work with you guys next week. Like, I am ready and I really want this. And I got the position, and I got the position over someone that they already knew and had worked there. And it turns out they told me later it was the whole interview, but also the fact that I said that, just
Right,
being super proactive and
right,
open and transparent and
right,
just putting it all on the table. Like, if I'm
right.
going to leave and I really want that position, I'm not going to leave the table without telling them that, you
That's
know?
exactly right.
And you
That's
never know, if
exactly
I
right.
hadn't have gotten that position, it was between me and that person that they did know. You never know, they might call me back in a month when someone has, left because of illness or
Maternity
whatever. So
leave.
always express that in your thank you as
Right,
well. And if you don't get the position, always express that in your reply back. Um,
right,
that you really did enjoy the interview. And if any other vacancies pop up or this person doesn't work out that they've
right.
selected, you're still open to a call,
You
right?
know, that really ties back to, you were talking about interviews from a job perspective, from a
Hmm.
coaching perspective, that really ties back to asking for the business. So we're having a little bit of a
Right.
sales conversation, right? Like, I think a lot, I started
Yes.
doing this consciously within the last couple of years. So I've been in business since 2001 and didn't do it consciously. I'm sure I was doing
Yeah.
other things right, because you don't stay around that long. So you had to done some things right, but I don't remember doing it consciously. And one of the things that I'll do is I will say to people, so when I'm doing a talking to a would-be client, I usually do, I call it the Texas two-step, where I get a referral, I talk to the person, get a chance to get to know them, take some notes, figure out whether or not I can assist or not, add some value. Do we seem like we're hitting it off? And then I'll say, listen, let's do another call if you'd like, where I can actually get serious, talk to you about this, and make sure they understand budget, ballpark, how much time it's going to take. They're like, yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, let's sit down and meet again, that type of thing. And then the second time is where I go over some things. I have an idea of what we could do together, that kind of stuff. Okay. And
Mhm.
what I've now started doing consciously, let's say within the last 12 months, is, hey, listen, you know what? We really love to, I really do believe I can add some value. I really do think I can, and I'll use the term, and coaches feel free. I really do believe I can add some value. I believe that I can accelerate your success in this area that you're talking about right here. Do you, or could you look this up on YouTube? Yes. Could you get a book? I'm sure you can. Where I feel like I'm a
Mm.
little bit different is I can do this, this, and this, and I'll be working, let's say it's private sessions. I can be working with you side by side as we go through this. And, from an investment standpoint, we're looking at this. We're going to be able to get this, this, and this, and bam. You know what I mean? And that, like, more often than not, I don't get a lot of empty trips, second calls. Okay. There's
Mhm.
qualifying in there, which is a conversation about
Yeah.
qualifying, right? I don't get a lot of empty trips, second calls. So what happens is, but back to your point, so this is not necessarily networking, this is kind of like business building, asking for what it is that you'd like. I think a lot of times coaches, we talked about confidence. I think a lot of times there's a imposter syndrome, and that there's a lack of confidence. Dogs bark for two reasons. Number one, because they want you to leave. And number two, because they're scared. And I think that as coaches, there's a lot of barking at door number two. And that goes back to the point I was making earlier with the expertise. There's almost this idea of, if we can show people how smart we are, and, talk about expertise in, five different languages, maybe we'll throw an Arab dialect in there for our fifth language. Okay. If we can throw that in Indian, Pakistani, and six and seven, if we can just tell them in all these different ways how much of an expert we are, then we won't actually have to say, we'd love your business. Somehow
Mm.
I could, right? Like, somehow I can get around that. It's a little bit like, I'm going to go here for a second. It's a little bit like, you see kids these days. I know you have kids. I don't, but I see kids these days, and I'm like, they're so busy on their phone. I mean, I don't get into it because it's not my problem, but I'm thinking to myself, do they know that they're actually going to have to be living with the person that they marry?
Huh. Hey, yeah.
I mean, I don't
Yes.
know.
Yeah.
I honestly don't know. I don't know if we should send out a text. I don't know if we should have some type of rally talking about it. I don't
Right.
know if we should send it out on Earth Day. I don't know. Okay. But like, do they know that you're going to actually have to live with that person? And do they know that a preceding factor to that is actually getting to know the person,
Yeah.
like
And
talking
how
to
to
them?
do that. Yeah.
I mean, and listen, none of this is my problem. Okay. But like, do they know that? And I think sometimes as coaches, we approach it like we don't know that.
Mm,
And I think that, maybe even the body politics sometimes we get so into our phone. And then, like I said, that imposter syndrome, that lack of confidence, that not asking for the business, all of these points that you were kind of alluding to, and, maybe I'm tying back a little bit,
right.
that all comes up and it's super, super important. And I love the point that you made about not having all the slots covered. Real quick on that. I think that as coaches, again, we get in our own way again and we're like, oh, well, we don't have this. So let me go out and get 15 more certifications. Let me go out and get 30 more
Yeah.
certifications. Let me tell you what you want to do. What I did the last 24 months is two things. Number one, I took the date with Unleash the Power Within, Tony Robbins. That was last year.
Mm,
Virtual. We spent $300, okay, for a 4-day virtual with Tony Robbins. That included the board.
mm.
Okay. $300 because he could break the board at the end. I chose not to. I'm sorry. It was $400 with the board, 300 without. I didn't break the board. I'm not breaking the board. Okay. And then the second thing I did was this manifestation mastery.
Mm,
Okay. And you threw that in there with keeping an open mind that you mentioned before. And
yeah.
guess what? Business is moving in the right direction. I think that's a good thing for a lot of people. So I just wanted to kind
Right.
of tie all of that in there. Those are some excellent, excellent points, Sue, that you were able to bring up. Tell these guys where they can find you. And I know that you also mentioned your podcast. So get into that a little bit. Take your time. What's the podcast all about? And then where can they find you?
So tying this all in together, I know I've talked about teaching and career space and real estate, and it's like, how is this girl on your show? But I am, the president of Realty Associates in Houston, Texas, which is a large brokerage. So if you're looking for a brokerage home in Texas, we have offices all over the state. But I do that, but I also coach. I coach real estate team leaders and boutique brokerage owners. So susarviscoaching.com is where you
Okay.
can find me. But also I'm starting a podcast called She Leads Real Estate. So
Right.
you can check that out. It is for women in the leadership space of real estate.
Right.
So I'm talking to different experts, different top producers, tips, tricks, things I've learned along the way, such as setting up team structure, team agreement, team dynamics,
Good.
all of those things.
That's good.
I feel like, the podcasting space, there's so many podcasts these days, and it's only growing. Like the projection of number of podcasts in the next 5 years is a large increase. And I thought
Right.
I would like to get my stuff out there and interview
Yeah.
others and learn about other people's businesses on this podcast. So that's She Leads Real Estate.
That is awesome. And it's Sue SU, right? So it's
It,
Sue Susarvis.
that's right. Yes. And you can find me on LinkedIn under Su Sarvis Coaching as well. Yes.
Okay. Awesome. Well,
Yeah.
Sue, we really appreciate you coming
Thank
on. This was
you.
a pleasure. It was some really good stuff. I appreciate it, guys. I hope you were taking notes because this was some really good stuff. And we love as coaches talking about the referral. But at the end of the
Yes.
day, unless you're actually going out and doing it, the problem that we have is we think a referral is some type of validation for who we are and how we show and how we be. Part of it is that, but it's also a validation of a process. It's not even a validation, it's a byproduct of a process. And in certain cases, it's a byproduct of a mindset that we kind of
Yeah.
talked about as well. So good stuff,
Right.
Sue. Thank you so
Yeah.
much.
You're welcome. Thank you.